So I said, how about asking him about this project? So I prepared 13 questions that were related to the foundations of body politics. We went to Noflo Chateau, where he was residing. So I handed to his son-in-law. So he went in with the questions. He came back 10 minutes later. He handed over my questions to me. He looked into my eyes and he said, the Ayatollah is not going to answer these questions.
Welcome to Unmuted, where honest voices and bold conversations take center stage. Today's guest is Dr. Ladan Boroumand, a historian, human rights advocate, and one of the most respected voices documenting state violence in Iran. She is the co-founder and senior fellow at Abdorrahman Boroumand Center for Human Rights, a leading NGO cited by UN and Amnesty International. With a PhD in history from France under François Frouet, her work bridges deep academic insight and fearless activism. Dr. Boroumand has written extensively on both the French and Iranian revolutions, with articles in the Journal of Democracy, the Washington Post, and Le Monde. She's also one of the rare Iranians to have interviewed Ayatollah Khomeini in exile. Her forthcoming book, The Islamic Republic's War on Iranians and How America Got Caught in It, continues her powerful witness to the Iranian people's struggle for freedom. This conversation goes beyond politics. We'll explore how history, ideology, and personal memory interact, and how Dr. Boroumand has used her scholarship to expose injustice and preserve dignity in the face of repression. If you are wondering how we got here, how Iran's revolution betrayed its promises, and what hope remains, then stay with us. This episode will challenge, inform, and hopefully inspire. It is a real privilege to have you with us on podcast on Unmuted, and thank you for joining me. You've dedicated your life to studying revolutions, human rights, and democracy. And I'm curious, what first inspired you to take this path? And when did it become clear to you that preserving these stories and defending human rights was more than research, but really your life's mission?
Good morning to you, and thank you for the invitation. I'm really pleased to be speaking with you today. Well, you're asking about my whole life, basically. Democracy and human rights have been a sort of family culture in my life. My father was a lawyer, pro-democracy lawyer, so as far as I can remember in my life, democracy was something that I was attached to and I wanted to know and understand. Because, family transmission is not real. I mean, it is education. I always think of an episode of my life with my father that was my best lesson of democracy. But as soon as I finished high school and I was sent to France to pursue my university studies, I started to study democracy and human rights.
I've started reading the content you're putting out there, your research and your work, and it's very insightful. I really appreciate what you do and providing this information, especially to Western audience. I, as an Iranian, have learned so much by reading your content, and I'm sure our Western audience will learn as well. Let me ask a question. In one of your essays, you contrast Khomeini's idea of Homo Islamicus with the modern Iranian idea of the free individual. Where do you see that clash most vividly playing out in everyday life, at work, at home, or online? What does that tell you about how Iranians see themselves today?
Well, actually, Khomeini's ideas are in sharp contrast with a man defined as a free will and autonomous man, a man or a human being who can decide his belief, about his belief, decide about his life. what Khomeini had in mind, and what I mentioned as Homo Islamicus, Khomeini's anthropology, Khomeini, the way he thought of human beings and their passage in this life was different. It wasn't for Khomeini. In each human being, there is one animal and one godly being, and so what he wanted to do is that uh, the process of life for Khomeini was for each individual to transcend its animality and become a godly human being. And he decided that it was not for human being to do this autonomously, but he was mandated by God to force human being from their animality to their godly being. And that's where things started to be bad. And that's his Homo Islamicus in his mind was to force all of us to become what he thought was a godly being, godly human being, not what we independently thought so. And he thought that this was his mandate that was transferred from the prophet to the theologian, and that was where he had he drew the legitimacy of his political power. But I can tell you more about it, because if you want, I mean, if you think it's worthy to know, is that Khomeini was even within the Shia, the Islamic
Yes.
Shia doctrine, he was a heretic.
Oh, so there are many Shiite clerics and scholars were disagreeing with his ideology that he introduced to Iranians.
Yes, massively, because his main, most challenging oppositionists were the grand ayatollahs of his time. Their majority rejected that because, he had taken a small prerogative, clerics
Mm.
prerogative, which, if the society is in turmoil or chaos, or if a child has lost his parents, the the clerics, or the high-ranking clerics, the Ayatollah who is in there at the time, would be responsible for the well-being of this child, parentless child,
Yes.
orphan. And sometimes, if there was a big chaos in society, everybody was in danger, again, a theologian could step in to try to help with the orders. But in Shia tradition, never the clerics had any right or prerogative to rule a community or to control a society. It was a very short-lived and a small prerogative, but he took this and he extended to every aspect of every citizen and to the control of the state, basically.
So his title changed from was it Ayatollah to Imam? Was that something that it was planned by him and people around surrounding him, or was a natural occurrence in a society?
No, that was a religio-political trick he played, because the title in Sunni tradition, they call everybody, every clerics could be called Imam. In Shia tradition, the title of Imam was reserved to the 12
Hmm.
saints descendant from the Prophet Muhammad, whose last one is absent for now and will be the savior, right?
Yes.
Nobody else had the right to claim this title. And as I'm studying the history of the revolutionary movement, I realized that that was a very, uh, they had strategic a tactical approach that few of his students used. When his son died in November 1977, and because the Shah's regime was liberalizing at the time, he was in Iraq as an exile oppositionist
Yes.
Ayatollah, but they allowed people to organize memorial services.
Mm.
And I think that was really prepared, because in his close associates would travel from one village to another village, from one city to another city, and they kept organizing
Mm.
memorial services for his son, insinuating that the Shah had killed him, which was a total
Mm.
lie. And they incriminated the Shah
Right.
with many crimes he had never committed. And there they started to talk about Imam Khomeini.
Mm.
And given the psychological impact of the title of Imam on the population, on a faith, believing population, they transformed his son to a martyr and he himself to an Imam. And
Mm.
even that use of the title Imam was very badly viewed by the great Ayatollahs at the time.
That's very interesting. Being there and live there and witnessing all that happen. It's totally something. Why do you think so many ordinary Iranians now reject this Velayat-e Faqih title? I would like to explain what that means as well, and what are the examples of that rejection?
First of all, let me tell you something. I was maybe that's an episode of my life that is interesting. It was very important in my life because I learned a lot both about politics specifically. I was a student in Paris at the time of the revolution, and Ayatollah Khomeini arrived in Paris in early October 1978. And the doctrine of Velayat-e Faqih, which you mentioned, which means the guardianship of the theologian. And this is exactly what I say when Khomeini
Yes.
became a heretic, because he had this idea of that the body politic must be controlled by a theologian. So he was really
Yes.
proposing a theocracy,
Right.
and this person was himself, obviously. Um, and so I didn't know about that. Nobody had heard about this Velayat Faqih at the time.
Yeah.
So accidentally, in one library, I found his treatise and I read it. And I was absolutely, um, both surprised and very worried. And I asked, you know, my political family was the pro-Mossadegh liberal family, and there were a network of these people whom I knew in Paris. One of them was the man Abul Hassan Bani Sadr, who became the first president of the Islamic Republic. Basically, he changed his political orientation from a liberal nationalist leanings to pro-Khomeini. And I asked him, I knew him at the time, and I talked to him about this book. And Banisat said, oh, the Ayatollah has evolved. He has changed.
Mm.
So I said, how about asking him about this project? And I was very young. I was 20. I was pretty ignorant, but I was familiar enough with democracy to understand that that thing was not democracy. So I prepared 13 questions that were related to the foundations of body politics, the role of the individual, the role of the states, and etc. And the last one was, the polite last question: what's your message for the Iranian youth?
Right.
Something like this. We went to Noflo Chateau, where he was
Yes.
residing, and we handed over the question. And you hand over in clerical Islamic, I mean Shia clerical things, you hand something to someone who give to someone. So
Right.
I handed to his son-in-law, And the son-in-law went in. It was before he came to speak to a bunch of young people. And I was a part of this group. So he went in with the questions. He came back 10 minutes later. He handed over my questions to me. He looked into my eyes and he said, the Ayatollah is not going to answer these questions.
Wow.
I said, why? He said, because this is not the right time for answering this question. That moment, I knew something fishy was going on
Right.
something was rotten in here. But I was very shy, and apparently I don't remember myself, but the other young people who were with me later told me, you pretty much made a scandal there, why he's not answering and so on. And that was from that moment, which was maybe early or mid-January 1979, Khomeini had not returned to Iran yet. He returned on February 1st. I became very suspicious of this man. And I decided it was the time for my master thesis, and I thought maybe I should write it about the revolution. And I decided to go to Iran to interview all these people who were following him by hundreds of thousands or millions, and see if they knew about this Velayat-e, the
Right.
guardianship of the theologian. And I realized that as I went, then I started to interview students, teachers. I went even to factories. I interviewed many people at the time, and nobody had ever. My questions were, what is your ideal project, political
Yes.
project? What do you want? And none of them, not one single one of them, had ever heard about the guardianship of the
Wow.
theologians. And the project they were describing, looked like a normal representative regime and a rule of law regime.
Right.
So it was, and until very late, I mean, he never mentioned Velayat Faqih until he had his constituent assembly, whose name he changed to Assembly of Experts. So every step he took politically was to change the democratic, even names of the institutions into an elitist, non-democratic one. So the Assembly of the Nation, National Assembly, which means that the power is within the nation, he changed it to the Islamic Assembly. The Constituent Assembly, which referred to elected people to create the constitution of the state, he changed it to the Assembly of Experts. So
Wow.
constantly,
Yes.
politically, he replaced very shrewdly. I mean, he was a philosopher, and those who were around him understood nothing of politics. So basically, it was easy for him to play them. When you say, when did people turn away from Velayat Faqih or the
Yes.
guardianship of they never were for it. They were tricked into it. And by the time it was imposed upon them, state violence had reached such dimensions that nobody dared contesting it. It was very dangerous, you
Wow.
know. And one of the main uprising against the Velayat Faqih, as early as December 1979, was led by a Grand Ayatollah Shariat Madari, who strongly stood by the sovereignty of the people versus the theocratic power of a cleric. And he was crushed. Khomeini told him, either you call back the people inside, or I'm going to bomb Azerbaijan.
Wow.
And these clerics, they were not used to politics. And as you know, the predominant brand of Shiism was what we call quietism, which is a cleric should not get involved in politics. And so as soon as they thought there would be bloodbath, the guy called back his people and it was the end of the rebellion. And he was in house arrest until the end of his life. And he was the man who had, to save Khomeini, had given him his title of Ayatollah in 1964.
What an insightful and interesting angle. I never looked at it this way, that the whole nation were tricked into this ideology and the novel ideas of Islamic, philosophy, and then eventually taking over the whole country.
Yes, I think he was our Lenin in a way. He used the aura of the title of Imam. At the time, 60% of the Iranian population was not yet they couldn't read and write. So he used this attachment, emotional attachment of people by usurping the title of Imam, and also the way he behaved, very modest, quote unquote, not corrupt, because his sons around him, corruption was, bribing and everything was going on massively, but he himself was had a very a modest life, and so people trusted him, but had no idea of the political meaning and Velayat Faqih. They were not, they were tricked into it. And I don't think, if you compare in the referendum of the Islamic Republic, which
Right.
established in the spring, officially abolished the monarchy and established the Islamic Republic, over 90% voted for the Islamic Republic. At the time, there was no question yet of Velayat-e Faqih or the guardianship of the theologian. But when in 6 months later, in August 1979, they were an election for the assembly of experts, the assembly that would then write into the constitution his hidden agenda, only less than 50% participated. So from a participation of 90%, 5 months later, it dropped to less than 50%, which meant that people already had understood. And from then on, terror and bribing, because he promised people, I would give you
Right.
free houses, free
Right.
water, free electricity.
Yes.
So, and he created a sort of schism within a united nation by, the downtrodden against the westernized or against the rich
Right.
people. He did the playbook of Leninist, Stalinist tactics.
The way you talk to him, it just, my perspective, I mean, I was about 5, 6 years old when the revolution happened. Obviously, don't remember much about it. I've read the history of the revolution, but the way you're talking about him, it's very interesting. You are basically, my perception, my understanding was he was a very simple guy. He was not the sharpest guy around, and everybody else kind of empowered and set the whole stage for him to be empowered. But it looks like he was the mastermind. He was the philosopher, ideologist that forced this Islamic regime into Iran.
And this is the lesson I learned from him. At the foundation moments in body politics, you have these characters who become determining, are those who know what they want. They have a consistent philosophy and they stick to their principles. Khomeini was such a person. And so was one of his main challengers at the time, who was Shapur Bakhtiar, who tried to save democracy and warn the nation, telling them, be careful, a theocracy will be worse than a military dictatorship. And he warned them, and he too knew what democracy was and what the principles of democracy were, and why should people stand by these principles. And the clash of these two men were a determining moment, and the Iranian people was not politicized. They were ignorant, analphabet politically. Even the
Yes.
elite didn't understand the meaning of this clash. So that's where I learned my lessons that ideas matter in politics, very much so.
As Dr. Boroumand just shared with us, Iran's struggle isn't just political. It's about human dignity, following your conscience, and having the freedom to choose your own path. From the regime's push to create a Homo Islamicus to brave women removing their veils, we're seeing Iranians reclaiming their true identity. Many are stepping away from state-imposed religion and exploring faith on their own terms, with some discovering the hope that Christ offers. Here at Heart for Iran, we walk alongside this movement with culturally thoughtful media, safe spaces for growth, scriptures in their language, and practical care when it's needed most. If this conversation strikes a chord with you, would you consider partnering with us? Visit heartforiran.com to see how our broadcasts reach homes across Iran, how seekers find mentorship in their own language, and how your prayers and generosity can strengthen believers facing tough situations. Your support, whether sharing this episode with friends, lifting up prayers, or giving whatever amount feels right to you, amplifies the voices of Iranians pursuing freedom and authentic faith. Learn more or get involved at heartforiran.com. Thank you so much for standing with the incredible people of Iran.
You're talking about other thinkers that came into the stage, like Soroush, like Kadifar, like Shabestari, and they argued for democracy and freedom of conscience. How did their thought affected clerics, affected the scholars during the revolution?
We need to look at their background. So let's remember that the majority of traditional Shia establishment was against what Khomeini was doing. When he took over, some of them found interest in the money they were giving them and so on. So they rallied them. Others remained quietist and against them. You cannot, extract what was happening in Iran at the time from the international world and from the ideas dominant at the time. At the time, so we had this Cold War, and the Soviet Union was very actively supporting the Islamic Republic, Islamic regime and Islamic revolution, contrary to what appears. And there were, I think, the Soviets had, for a very long time, nurtured a class of young clerics who were revolutionary and basically had this mindset, Leninist mindset about, and for them, promoting the revolutionary Islam. And that's when also at the time you had a clash. The Grand Ayatollah Shariat Madari I mentioned, who resisted Khomeini, Khomeini immediately dubbed his ideas American Islam, as opposed to the revolutionary Islams. So America has always been with us in this story. And so these young clerics that you mentioned, one of them is not cleric, Soroush is an intellect. These were the Leninist or radical Islamists who became the militant, helping Khomeini access power and keep power. And when in the late 1980s, the Soviet Union collapsed, the Islamic revolutionary certitudes also collapsed. So they were following the trend, the intellectual world trend. And that collapsed all the more so that as soon as the Soviet Union collapsed, the more reactionary activists that were close to Khomeini and were kind of sidelined, those who were for economic freedom, amassing fortune, and so on, but very fundamentalist on the Sharia part of and also very fundamental. They agreed on the guardianship of the theologians. These people immediately took over. Khomeini was dead at the time.
Yes.
Rafsanjani came to power and he said, we are going to liberalize the economy. We want business, reconstruction. Basically, they said, now that communism, we are not under the spell of communism, we are going to put aside these leftist clerics and we are going to take control of the state and basically enrich ourselves. That was the program. So these people who had controlled the state, for the clerics like
Right.
Kadivar or the other one you mentioned,
Shabestari.
Shabestari, they started to study. They went into intellectual institute. They started to studies. They kind of passed over their Leninist revolutionary ideas and espoused democracy. Some of them, that is the time that they were also connection with Christianity. They became more interested in knowing more seriously, not in a sort of propaganda, and they started to read great Christian theology, theologians. I mean, from Augustine's to St. Thomas of Aquinas and more modern liberal German theologians, and their minds started to change. And they started to say clerics should not rule.
Very
And
interesting.
they started a real reform, an intellectual reform movement. And not only, I think they influenced the younger clerics, even they are read by more established Ayatollah, and there is an ongoing debate within them. So Ayatollah Khamenei lost both the revolutionary groups and, of course, they never had the traditional quietists. And so one of the things that attracted my attention was in the early 2010, Khamenei's speeches were always warning against American Islam influencing the seminaries.
Yes.
And by American Islam, he meant an Islam that was tolerant and was against the rule of the theologians.
Very interesting. Let me ask you about the recent trends in Iran. And I know that you've done your own research, and we have immensely a Christian organization have benefited from your research on this. And I had the privilege of knowing you in person today and knowing that your extended work. Let's talk about what's happening in Iran in the light of the latest research that's coming out showing that the big chunk of populations are not identifying themselves with the Shiite Muslims anymore, and they're kind of looking for new alternatives. And you've mentioned in your works that Sufism and even Christianity has become one of the alternatives. And again, we as a Christian organization are experiencing that shift of ideology and faith when people are calling in and saying we were Muslims, now are shifting to a new faith, which is Christianity. Talk to me about the research and your insight into this.
Do you remember I said that people were tricked into this project?
Yes.
And they never liked it? And for a while, they thought Khomeini's, or this regime is a problem, not the religion. But the problem is that there is we've seen the Soviet Union also tried to infiltrate the church, and they had this liberation theology and all of this but there were strong, both intellectual and institutional religious powers that protected religion from becoming the instrument of political goals, or at least to some extent they did. We didn't have, the Shia clergy couldn't resist this assault on the integrity of its faith. And I think its faith was not up to date with the modernity. It had missed the turning towards modernity. So people, when you see, my own, I thought of myself as a Muslim when I was 18, 19. I didn't have any problem with my religion. My parents were liberals. We were free to choose what we studied, what as a girl, we were, free to decide for our fate in our family. And my father was praying, not very practicing Muslim, but, I was emotionally attached to these 12 Imams. Honestly, God, the moment Khomeini took power and the moment he started to execute people summarily, my religion was gone.
Wow.
Finished. I was
Wow.
completely. And I think this, I'm not an exception. I think many people felt this at different moments of their lives. You arrest people, they have been partying together, you flog them. The humiliation and the pain of these floggings disgust you of this religion. So if they said, these people said, this is our religion, you have to obey by the laws of this religion, you are a Muslim.
Yes.
How a society resist? The society puts up a cultural resistance. And you said, if that is the religion, I don't want it. I'm going to look for other alternative. And, the conversions are to Christianity, to Baha'ism, to Zoroastrianism,
Yes.
which is the traditional and religion of, antiquity, which also has, don't lie, don't say bad things, don't do bad things. These are attractive, even if they don't, there is conversion to Christianity, to Zoroastrianism. Nobody knows, there is no an official church that accept them, but they do it by themselves. And Christianity is also I think I found this also again when I listened to Khomeini, Ayatollah Khomeini, the leader, the supreme leader's warning against people turning to Christianity, and realized that there must be a problem here. And as you know, there had been this survey of Iranians' religious leanings in 1979. Really, 90% of the Iranian people were Muslim. A vast majority Shia, but a minority Sunnis. And I don't know, you must know better than I, maybe 1,500 Muslim converts to
Yes.
Christianity around at a time when the churches
Right.
were not under violence, under the Shah.
Yes.
I went to a French school that was organized by the nuns, Jeanne d'Arc École. They were English school by priest, Protestant, Catholic, and so they were not killed. And you had only around 1,500 Muslim convert. Now, the survey we have had, I think they say about 1 million people are.
Yes.
Maybe more, we don't know really, but we had a survey on the religious leanings of the Iranians. 50,000 people participated in it, and it was, based on sort of weighing demographics and all of the necessary precaution when you have an online anonymous survey, and only 32% of the Iranians claim being Shia, espousing the same, the official religion of the country. 22% have no religion. 7.7% say they are Zoroastrian. Christian, 1.5%. of the population, which is amazing. You know, when I'm looking, if you're a historian and you look at this, that for 1400 years you didn't have conversion to Christianity, or very few in a way, and in 50 years you have more than 1 million conversion, you think, okay, we are at a juncture that looks like years before Roman Empire turned to
Right.
Christianity.
Yes.
It's a defining historic, social, and cultural moment in the Middle East, in the Muslim world, because Iran is not a majority Muslim country anymore.
That is amazing statement, and that is the reality we see. And some reports say that Iran has the fastest growing church in the whole world percentage
Yes.
wise, and that's just Christianity. And you also mentioned that the Sufism and Zoroastrianism. Let me ask you a question. I want to hear your thoughts about it. You mentioned that 22% of Iranians, based on this survey, do not embrace any religion. Would you say because of the Iranians, even though they're stepping away from their Islamic religion they born with, but they're still spiritual and they're looking for some sort of alternative, you wouldn't consider them as a secular atheist?
Well, we have a 8.8% who officially claim to be atheist. Then we have a big agnosticism, 5%, 5.5% agnostics. And, I think most of the people want a tolerant society. Many say they don't reject spirituality. Actually, a big chunk, a vast majority believe in God, but not in religion. So when they say the 22% who say they are not religious, it doesn't mean they don't believe in God, you know? So total atheism, I think eight, maybe 10% who are disgusted by their experience. But we don't know. The survey I'm referring to was done 5 years ago, and things change very rapidly socially
Right.
in
Do you think the
Iran.
numbers are
So we
even
don't.
bigger now?
I can't tell you. I can't
Right.
tell you because at the time, democracy, human rights were part of what people wanted. But now, again, Iran, you can never extract Iran from the world.
Right.
And now with the rise of authoritarianism of different sort, nationalism, and autocratic ideology, we need to do another survey to
Right.
know more.
And thank you very much for doing this research and connecting with the Iranian society, and you're up to date and informing not only the Western world, but we Iranians need to be updated. I've spent almost most of my life outside of the United States, and my understanding or perception of Iran is back then, and I had the privilege of meeting Dr. Boroumand with a group of young Iranians that they came out of the country for a short time, and I spent a week with them, talked to them. I just wanted to get to know how young people are thinking. These are young people ranging from 20 years old to 27 years old, and 80-90% of these people were women. And they were leaders of some sort in their own society. They were leading little groups of their own churches or whatever group that they were part of. And I came back home thinking that I had a totally different understanding of Iran. What I'm thinking of Iranian women, what I think they think about themselves is wrong, and things are changing rapidly. And Iranian women are finding their identity. They're fighting for their freedom. And let me ask you this question, by this context. Would you say women's challenge to forced veiling has turned struggle from political debate into something much deeper about dignity and identity, especially for women?
Yes, I think so. Because, I mean, the first group, social group that rose against Khomeini were women in March 8, 1979, when he ordered women who work in the state bureaucracy to wear veil. And thousands came out, schoolgirls, university women, and there was a blackout. I mean, the television was already controlled by the system. Nobody saw them except some foreign journalists who documented the events. So women have been victimized and really object of gender apartheid for 40 years. And you can see their fight. First, they are really violently repressed. Then, even women who worked with the state started to realize that, they are being abused. So you had this Islamic feminism that was part. Then they started to negotiate with the state to get more right, the guardianship of the children. Their life is worth half the life of a man. Their testimony is worth half a testimony of a man. Everything is geared to humiliate them in a modern world, you know,
Yes.
because they had these rights under the Shah. They were equal to men
Yes.
under the Shah before the law. So what took it to the veil, actually, because this was the first act of Khomeini.
Yes.
His two first acts, one was the revolutionary tribunal, which started the summary execution of people, where Khomeini basically, through the revolutionary tribunal, send a message to the Iranian that there is no more declaration of right. You have no rights. I have the right to your death and life. I am your creator. Basically, he
Hmm.
posed himself through the control of the life, arbitrary control of the life and death, as their God. That's the second was, I'm going to transform the women of Iran into my female Homo Islamicus. They must wear this and this color and obey and lose everything. So women started in mid 1990s, started to negotiate, fight back, but they were dialoguing with the state. Please let us keep our children after they grow, they are more aged, if we have a divorce, because after 4 the child is transferred to the guardianship of the father. Or they started to ask for the right to divorce. They started to ask for, the right to study without the permission of their husbands. And also, more importantly, the child marriage. It's 13.
Yes.
It was 9 first.
Right.
So the regime made an effort and now it's 13. But if a cleric allow the parents, they can give to their child of 9 years, the daughter of 9 year,
Wow.
9 years old, to marriage. So all of this, nothing
Yes.
happened. And basically, what brought women fight to the veil is exactly what you say, because after a while, first of all, this was not a matter of negotiation. They could take it up themselves. That was in their power.
Yes.
Second, the symbolism of the veil was that Khomeini and the regime was telling them, because the way you dress is part of your freedom of expression. That's how you express yourself.
Right.
That's how you define yourself. So they started to act its civil disobedience, but also it was taking power. I don't need to negotiate with you. I'm
Mm.
taking it off. And the scenes you saw in Women Life Freedom Movement, when the girls started to burn the veil, they were burning the foundational principles of the Islamic Republic. And I didn't know I would be alive to see that, but I had no doubt that one day we will see these women burning this symbol of servitude
Mm.
and affirm their autonomy by burning it in the public space. And they did it May God bless them.
Wow. Wow. I'm really enjoying. I wish we had many, many hours to sit down and talk to you. Let me ask you a last question, Dr. Boroumand. If Iran were to separate religion and state tomorrow, what are the three basic rules or protections would you say that are non-negotiable?
Well, the survey that we had on that is that people want tolerance. And they want to be free to choose their religion. They want to be free to worship what they want. But there is a pretty strong feeling against the mixing of politics and religion. So when they say in the survey, they were asked, for instance, if a majority of Shia or any other religion uh, is elected into the parliament, are they allowed to legislate based on the religion? And there is a big no.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so you
Yes.
can have your values and have policy based on your values, but there is no Sharia in
Right.
any religion should be mixed with politics. This is a
Right.
big no. And so I think there is debate on should the state fund religion, or each denomination or each religious group should fund their own churches or whatever mosques, or there is a big debate also about that. I mean, we have to see how it has evolved, but people are not really fond in. I mean, probably the German version would not be accepted given the
Mm-hmm.
circumstances. So each group should fund their own religion.
Thank you very much, Dr. Boroumand, for spending time with us and sharing your thoughts, your
Thank you.
research. And these are, I would definitely recommend everyone to check out your content, and we're going to share that with our audience as well. And I would ask you if you can please be with us in the next episodes, if the time allows.
With great pleasure. Thank you for this interesting conversation.
Dr. Boroumand, it's been an honor having you on Unmuted, and thank you very much for helping us understand not only Iran's struggle, but also the universal longing for rights and justice. And I know our audience will walk away both challenged and inspired. We look forward to following you and your work and learning more from you in the future. Listening to Dr. Boroumand reminds us how powerful memory, truth, and courage can be in the face of oppression. Her work challenges us to think not only about Iran, but also about the universal longing for dignity and freedom. If today's conversation gave you new insight or stirred something in you, I encourage you to stay connected with us. Subscribe to Unmuted so you can follow the rest of the episodes in the future and share these conversations with a friend who might benefit from this podcast. Thank you for spending this time with us. Until next time, let's keep the conversation honest, courageous, and unmuted.